They thought cutting me off financially meant I would starve in the gutter. They believed being a single mom was a death sentence for my dignity. But the prestigious Whitfield family made a fatal error. They forgot that diamonds are formed under terrible pressure. When my mother sent that text, she did not just disown a daughter. She inadvertently birthed a rival she could never defeat. I did not cry. I just started calculating interest on every tear I was supposed to shed. My name is Natalia Whitfield. I am 34 years old, and if you looked at my current bank balance, you would see exactly $412.87. It was a far cry from the trust funds and platinum credit cards I had grown up with, but every single cent in that account was clean. It was mine. I earned it through sleepless nights and endless spreadsheets, analyzing data trends for mid-sized companies that had no idea their freelance consultant was the estranged daughter of one of the most powerful financial dynasties in New York. We lived in a small, drafty apartment in the Rogers Park neighborhood of Chicago. The rent was $1,200 a month, which was a steal considering the square footage. Even if the radiator clanked like a dying engine every time the temperature dropped below 30 degrees, it was a Tuesday evening, the kind of gray, biting winter night that makes Chicago feel like it is trying to push you into the lake. Inside, however, it was warm. The scent of roasted garlic and cheap pasta sauce filled the air, a smell that felt like luxury to me because it meant we were fed and we were safe. My son, Leo, was lying on his stomach on the worn beige rug I had bought at a thrift store for $15. He was 8 years old, with hair the color of roasted chestnuts and eyes that held a curiosity too big for his small face. He was the reason for the distance, the reason for the struggle, and the absolute love of my life. I was sitting at the wobbly kitchen table, my laptop open. My eyes were burning from staring at rows of Excel data for 6 hours straight. I was working on a project for a logistics firm, trying to find a 0.5% discrepancy in their shipping costs. It was tedious work, the kind that makes your brain feel like it is slowly turning to mush, but I was good at it. I had a knack for seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. It was a trait I inherited from my father, Richard Whitfield, though he would never admit that a disappointment like me could share his genius. In the background of our quiet evening, the ghost of my past was stirring. I knew what date it was. It was December 12th, in the Whitfield calendar. This date was sacred. It was the week before the annual Winter Gala. The Winter Gala was not just a party. It was the social event of the season in Manhattan. It was where alliances were forged, marriages were arranged, and net worths were displayed like peacock feathers. Tickets cost $10,000 a plate for outsiders. But for the Whitfield inner circle, it was a coronation. I used to love it. I remembered the silk dresses, the flash of cameras, the feeling of being royalty. Now, sitting in my sweatpants with a stain of tomato sauce on the cuff, that world felt like a hallucination. Leo was playing on an old tablet. It was a cracked iPad that had once belonged to his cousin, my brother Marcus's son. When I left New York 3 years ago, I had grabbed it by mistake in the chaos of packing. I had wiped most of the data, installed a few educational games for Leo, and forgotten about its origins. It was just a toy now, a way to keep him occupied while I finished my work. I typed a final formula into my spreadsheet. Satisfied as the numbers balanced out perfectly, I stretched my arms over my head, hearing the satisfying pop of my spine. "Mom?" Leo's voice broke the silence. It was small, confused. "Yes, baby?" I asked, not looking away from my screen immediately. "Hungry for dinner? It is almost ready. I just need 5 more minutes." "No," he said. He sounded strange. Not hungry, not tired. He sounded troubled. "Mom, what is a stain?" I smiled, turning my chair around to face him. "A stain? Well, you know what a stain is. Remember last week when you dropped your grape juice on the carpet? That purple spot that wouldn't come out? That is a stain. It is something that marks a surface and is hard to clean." Leo frowned, his little eyebrows knitting together. He looked down at the tablet, then back up at me. His eyes were wide, innocent, and filled with a sudden, sharp vulnerability that made my stomach drop. "Is it bad to be a stain?" he asked. "Usually, yes," I said, standing up and walking over to him. "Why do you ask, Leo? Is there a stain on your shirt?" "No," he whispered. He held the tablet up to me. "Grandma said, you are one." The world stopped. The radiator ceased its clanking. The wind outside fell silent. The only sound was the rushing of blood in my ears, loud as a train whistle. I reached out and took the tablet from his small hands. My fingers were trembling. Just a fraction. I looked at the screen. It wasn't a game. It was iMessage. Because the tablet had belonged to the family estate, and because I had been so focused on survival, I had made a rookie technical mistake. I had never fully signed out of the old family cloud account on this specific device. It had been dormant for years, likely because no one used the corresponding account. But today, with the flurry of activity for the gala, the group chat titled Whitfield Legacy had reactivated, and it had synced. I stared at the glowing screen. There were dozens of messages discussing floral arrangements, seating charts, and press releases. But right at the bottom, glowing with malicious clarity, was a message from Mother. The timestamp was 2 minutes ago. Victoria Whitfield wrote, "Guest list finalized. I have double-checked with security. Do not invite Natalia. We cannot risk a scene. The presence of a lowly single mom like her is a stain on our perfect image. We have investors coming from Dubai and London. We need to look pristine." I read it again. A lowly single mom. A stain. I felt a physical blow to my chest, as if someone had swung a sledgehammer into my ribs. This was my mother, the woman who had taught me how to walk, who had critiqued my ballet posture, who had bought me my first pearl necklace. She did not see me as a daughter who was struggling, or a woman who was raising a child on her own. She saw me as dirt. She saw me as spilled grape juice on her white, pristine carpet. But it was the next part that severed the last thread of hope I didn't even know I was still holding. Below her message, the rest of them had reacted. Richard Whitfield, my father, had reacted with a thumbs-up emoji, a casual, effortless agreement to erase his own child. Marcus, my older brother, the golden boy who could do no wrong despite his gambling habits, had replied, "LOL. Don't worry, Mom. She probably couldn't afford the flight ticket anyway. Better she stays in the gutter." Serena, my younger sister, the influencer with 3 million followers who preached about kindness and mental health online, had reacted with a red heart emoji to my mother's insult. No one defended me. No one asked, "Is she okay?" No one said, "That is harsh." They were a pack of wolves, and I was the wounded animal they were leaving behind to die in the snow. My breathing hitched. I waited for the tears. I waited for the familiar sting of rejection that usually sent me crying into my pillow at night. I waited for the sobbing, the hyperventilating, the crushing weight of depression, but it didn't come. Instead, something else happened. A coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't the cold of the Chicago winter. It was the cold of absolute zero. It was the temperature of deep space. It started in my heart and spread to my fingertips, freezing the shaking. Steadying my pulse, I looked at the text message again. I didn't see insults anymore. I saw data. Statement: Natalia is a stain. Action: exclusion from family resources. Consensus: unanimous. Vulnerability: they were obsessed with their perfect image for the investors from Dubai and London. My mind, honed by 3 years of forensic data analysis, shifted gears. I stopped being Natalia, the sad, rejected daughter. I became the ghost auditor. I saw the hypocrisy in Marcus's text. He mocked my poverty while I knew for a fact he had borrowed $50,000 from me 5 years ago and never paid it back. I saw the irony in Victoria's obsession with perfection, when her own charitable foundation had holes in its ledger the size of the Grand Canyon. I was not sad. I was calculated. "Mom?" Leo's voice pulled me back. He was tugging on the hem of my sweater. He looked terrified. He had seen the look on my face. The transition from his warm, loving mother to something sharp and dangerous. "Does Grandma hate us?" he asked, his voice trembling. I looked down at him. My beautiful, innocent boy. He did not deserve this. He did not deserve to be collateral damage in their war for status. They had called me a stain, but they had forgotten that Leo was part of me. If I was a stain, he was one too in their eyes, and that was their fatal mistake. "You can insult me, you can cut me off, but you do not look at my son and call him dirt." I reached out and pressed the power button on the tablet. The screen went black, extinguishing the hateful blue bubbles of the Whitfield legacy chat. I dropped the tablet onto the table with a heavy thud. Then, I knelt down on the hard linoleum floor so I was eye level with Leo. I pulled him into my arms. He buried his face in my neck, his small body shaking slightly. I held him tighter than I ever had before. I could smell his shampoo, a cheap apple scent that cost $3 a bottle, and it smelled better than any imported French perfume Victoria Whitfield ever wore. I pulled back slightly and cupped his face in my hands. I looked him straight in the eyes, ensuring he saw no fear in mine. "Listen to me, Leo," I said, my voice steady, low, and terrifyingly calm. "Grandma does not hate us. She said bad words," he whispered. "People say bad words when they are blind." I told him. "They cannot see what is right in front of them. They think we are weak because we do not have their big house or their fancy parties. They think we are broken." I stood up, lifting him easily into my arms. He wrapped his legs around my waist, resting his head on my shoulder. I walked over to the window. Outside, the snow was starting to fall, covering the grime of the city in a blanket of pure white. "They didn't just say mean things, Leo," I whispered into the quiet apartment. "They just made a choice, and choices have consequences." "So they don't hate us?" he asked again. Needing reassurance, I looked at our reflection in the dark glass, a woman and a boy, alone against the world, but I didn't look weak. I looked like a fortress. "No, sweetie," I said, and I felt the truth of the words settling into my bones like iron. "They don't hate us. They just lost us." I turned away from the window. Carrying him to the kitchen, I served the pasta. We ate dinner. I read him a bedtime story about knights and dragons. I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, but when I walked back out to the kitchen, I didn't go to sleep. I sat back down at my laptop. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I opened a new browser window. I didn't open my work email. I navigated to the public records database for New York State business filings. Victoria had said I was a lowly single mom. She was right about the single mom part, but she was wrong about the lowly part. She had forgotten that I was the one who used to balance her checkbooks when I was 16. She had forgotten that I knew where the bodies were buried. Metaphorically speaking, I cracked my knuckles. The blue light of the screen illuminated my face. I wasn't crying. I was beginning the audit. I did not throw the tablet against the wall. I did not scream until my throat was raw. I did not pour myself a glass of cheap wine to numb the sting of rejection. Those were the reactions of a victim. And as of 8:13 in the evening on December 12th, I had ceased to be a victim. I became a ghost. My first action was surgical. I picked up my phone. I did not open the messaging app to draft a tearful plea for understanding. I went straight to the settings. I scrolled down to the contact list. Victoria Whitfield, block caller, Richard Whitfield, block caller, Marcus Whitfield, block caller, Serena Whitfield, block caller. I did not stop there. I went to every social media platform I possessed. I blocked their accounts. I blocked their friends. I blocked the official accounts of Whitfield Enterprises. I severed the digital arteries that connected me to their toxicity. It took me exactly 9 minutes. When I was finished, my phone was silent. The bridge was not just burned. I had dynamited the foundation. They expected noise. I knew them. I knew the rhythm of the Whitfield ego. They were sitting in their penthouse on the Upper East Side, sipping vintage scotch, waiting for my name to pop up on their screens. They were waiting for the apology. They were waiting for me to beg. They believed that without their validation, I would wither away like a plant deprived of sunlight. They were convinced that by tomorrow morning, I would be calling Marcus, weeping, asking for a loan, proving their theory that I was nothing but a parasite. They would wait a long time. My second action was logistical. I looked around our apartment in Rogers Park. It was small, but it was still $1,200 a month. That was too much. If I was going to go to war, I needed a war chest. I needed liquidity. I needed to minimize my burn rate to almost zero so that every dollar I earned could be weaponized. I walked into the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. Underneath a stack of winter sweaters, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside sat a sapphire ring surrounded by 14 small diamonds. It was an heirloom from my great-grandmother. It was the only thing of value I had taken when I left New York 3 years ago. My mother, Victoria, had asked for this ring back at least 20 times. She claimed it belonged to the estate. She claimed I had stolen it. In reality, my great-grandmother had given it to me on her deathbed because she said I was the only one in the family who had a spine. I looked at the blue stone. It glittered in the dim light of the bedroom lamp. It represented security. It represented a safety net. I snapped the box shut. The next morning, I did not go to my freelance co-working space. I took Leo to school, kissed him on the forehead, and told him to be brave. Then I took the train downtown to the Diamond District of Chicago. I did not go to a pawn shop. I went to a high-end estate jewelry buyer, a man named Mr. Solomon, who I knew from my previous life valued discretion over questions. I placed the ring on the glass counter. "I need cash," I said, "and I need it today." Mr. Solomon put on his loupe. He examined the stone for 3 minutes. The silence in the shop was heavy, smelling of old paper and metal polish. "This is a Whitfield piece," he said, not looking up. "I recognize the setting, 1920s, Art Deco." "It is my piece," I corrected him, "and I am selling it." "Does Victoria know?" he asked, finally looking at me over his spectacles. "Victoria thinks I am a stain," I said, my voice flat. "Stains do not own jewelry. Stains need survival money. How much?" He hesitated, then sighed. $22,000. 25? I countered immediately. "And you do not report the sale to the New York database for 30 days. He looked at me. He saw the hollowness in my cheeks and the fire in my eyes. He nodded. 24,000. Cash. Deal? Deal. I walked out of that shop with an envelope thick with $100 bills. It was more money than I had seen in 3 years. It was not a fortune, but it was a start. It was my ammunition. That afternoon, I broke our lease. I paid the penalty fee without blinking. I found a new apartment in a neighborhood that was 2 notches lower on the socioeconomic ladder. It was a basement unit in a brick building 3 miles west. The rent was $800. The windows were small, and the view was of a concrete alleyway. But the internet connection was fiber optic and fast. That was all that mattered. We moved in 48 hours. I sold most of our furniture. We slept on mattresses on the floor for the first week. Leo did not complain. He seemed to understand that we were in a bunker now. He set up his small corner with his books and his Lego sets. And he adapted. Children are resilient, far more than adults give them credit for. He asked about his grandmother only once more. "Are we hiding from them?" he asked as he unpacked his backpack. "No," I told him, taping a schedule to the peeling paint of the wall. "We are not hiding. We are preparing, with the immediate survival secured." I executed Phase 3. I needed power, and in my world, power did not come from social standing. It came from information. I applied to Veritas Horizon. Veritas Horizon was not a normal accounting firm. It was a legendary, almost mythical entity in the corporate world. They were the cleaners. They were the forensic auditors called in when Fortune 500 companies suspected internal bleeding but could not find the wound. They were expensive. They were secretive, and they were ruthless. My resume was sparse. Freelance data analyst did not scream elite auditor, but I had something other candidates did not. I had grown up watching Richard Whitfield hide millions of dollars in offshore accounts before he even finished his morning coffee. I knew the texture of a lie. I got the interview because I hacked their HR portal and rearranged my application to the top of the pile, flagging it with a priority code that only senior partners used. It was a risk, but I had nothing to lose. The interview was held in a glass-walled room on the 45th floor of a skyscraper overlooking the frozen Chicago River. 3 partners sat across from me. They looked like sharks in Italian suits. "You have no formal CPA certification," the lead partner, a woman with steel gray hair named Evelyn Vance, said. She tossed my resume onto the table like it was a napkin. "You have a gap in your employment history. You are a single mother. Why are you wasting our time?" "Give me a file," I said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "Give me a raw data dump from one of your cold cases," I said. "Give me 10 minutes. If I cannot find something your junior associates missed, I will walk out and you will never see me again." Evelyn stared at me. She saw the challenge. She slid a laptop across the table. "This is a redacted ledger from a logistics conglomerate," she said. "We have been auditing them for 3 months. We know there is a leak, but the numbers balance perfectly. You have 10 minutes. I opened the file. It was a chaotic ocean of numbers, thousands of rows, shipping costs, fuel surcharges, vendor payments. To a normal person, it was a headache. To me, it was a symphony that was slightly out of tune. I did not look at the totals. The totals are where amateurs look. I looked at the timestamps. I looked at the vendor ID numbers. 7 minutes passed. The room was silent except for the frantic clicking of my keyboard. "Time is almost up," one of the male partners sneered. "Found it," I said. I spun the laptop around. "Look at the fuel surcharges for the Midwest region," I said, pointing to a highlighted column. "Every 3rd Friday of the month, the surcharge increases by exactly 0.04%. It is small enough to look like a rounding error or a market fluctuation, but look at the vendor ID for these specific transactions. They all end in the sequence 99. I tapped the screen. "Vendor 99 is not a fuel company," I explained, my voice steady. I cross-referenced the tax ID. It is a shell entity registered in the Cayman Islands. The layout of their invoicing matches the default template of a common invoicing software used by small businesses, not major fuel suppliers. Someone in the logistics department is skimming less than 0.5% off the top, once a month, and funneling it to a dummy corporation. Over 5 years. That is $3.2 million. The room went dead silent. Evelyn Vance leaned forward. She looked at the screen. She pulled out a calculator. She punched in the numbers. She stopped. She looked up at me, and for the first time, the shark look vanished, replaced by something akin to fear mixed with respect. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am the person you hire when you want the truth," I said. "I can start tomorrow, and I want a signing bonus." I got the job. I got the bonus. I did not celebrate. I went home to our basement apartment. I bought Leo a new winter coat, one that was thick and waterproof. Not the second-hand one he had been wearing. Leo started at his new school the following Monday. It was a public school, rougher than his old one. But he walked in with his head held high. He was changing. The softness of his childhood was hardening into a quiet resolve. He stopped asking for new toys. He started reading my old textbooks on economics. "I want to help you, Mom," he told me one evening as we ate soup at our small kitchen table. "I want to be smart like you. You will be smarter," I promised him. "You will be dangerous." Meanwhile, in New York, the date arrived. December 20th, the Winter Gala. I did not check the news, but I knew it was happening. I could feel the vibration of it in the ether. My mother would be wearing a gown that cost $40,000. My father would be shaking hands with senators. Marcus would be drinking champagne and making promises he couldn't keep. They were standing in a ballroom filled with crystal and light, laughing, confident that the stain had been scrubbed away. They had forgotten me. To them, I was already a memory. a cautionary tale they whispered about to feel superior. They did not know that while they were toasting to their own greatness, I was sitting in the dark in Chicago, illuminated only by the glow of 3 monitors. It was 2 a.m. The wind was howling outside the basement window. Leo was asleep in the next room, his breathing rhythmic and peaceful. I was not sleeping, I was working. I had access to the Veritas Horizon database now. I had access to global financial records, and while I did my job for the clients during the day, at night, I began my own project. I opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it simply, Project Stain. I began to map out the Whitfield empire, not the public version they showed the world, but the real one. I started to trace the lines of credit. I started to look for the cracks. I knew where to look because I knew how my father thought. I knew he was arrogant. I knew he got lazy with his paper trails when he thought no one was watching. I typed in a line of code to scrape public tax filings for my brother's real estate ventures. The numbers began to populate the screen. Red numbers. Beautiful, damning red numbers. I took a sip of cold coffee. My eyes were dry. My back ached. But I felt alive. Let them have their gala. Let them have their caviar and their applause. Let them think they had won. They were dancing on a floor that was rotting beneath their feet, and I was the termite in the wood. I typed a command, execute search. The screen flashed. Data began to pour in. I was not crying. I was writing the first line of their eulogy. 3 years is a long time in the world of finance. It is enough time for a startup to become a unicorn, for a bull market to turn into a recession, and for a frightened single mother to become a weapon. They called me the Ghost Auditor. It was a nickname whispered in the break rooms of Veritas Horizon and muttered with fear in the boardrooms of the companies I investigated. I did not have a face in the industry press. I did not attend networking happy hours. I did not have a LinkedIn profile. I was simply a signature at the bottom of a forensic report. A phantom who could look at a stack of pristine invoices and smell the rot hidden 3 layers deep. My office on the 52nd floor was stark. I kept no pictures on the desk, only a high-performance terminal and an ergonomic chair that cost $2,000. The view behind me was a panoramic sweep of the Chicago skyline, a city of steel and ambition that suited my new skin perfectly. I was no longer the woman who counted coupons for pasta sauce. My salary had quadrupled. My bonuses were substantial, but I lived well below my means, funneling 70% of my income into a diversified portfolio and a secure education trust for Leo. I bought freedom, not things. While I was building a fortress of competence, the Whitfield family was busy polishing the bars of their golden cage. I monitored them, of course, not out of nostalgia, but out of necessity. Know your enemy. Marcus had discovered cryptocurrency, or rather, he had discovered the exhilarating speed at which one can lose an inheritance. Through my network of informants in the banking sector, I knew he had leveraged his equity in the family real estate holdings to buy into a speculative coin that had crashed 6 months ago. He was down $4 million. He was hiding the losses from our father, shuffling money between accounts like a street magician trying to hide the ball. Then there was Serena. My beautiful, vapid sister had launched a charity called Serena's Sanctuary, aimed at providing clean water to developing nations. It was the perfect accessory for her Instagram feed. The problem was that the water filters she claimed to be shipping did not exist. A journalist had started asking questions 2 months ago. Before the story could break, my mother, Victoria, had quietly wired $150,000 to a PR firm specializing in crisis management and reputation scrubbing. The story vanished. The journalist was reassigned. Serena posted a photo of herself crying, captioned with a quote about how hard it is to be an empath. And her follower count went up by 50,000. They were rotting from the inside out. But from the outside, the Whitfield name still gleamed like a polished diamond. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the file landed on my digital workspace. It was a blind audit. This was a standard procedure at Veritas Horizon for high-stakes clients who wanted absolute secrecy. The names of the companies were redacted, replaced by alphanumeric codes. The locations were obscured. My job was to look purely at the mathematics of the supply chain and identify inefficiencies or fraud. The file was labeled Client Case 409. I cracked my knuckles and began to work. The client was a manufacturing conglomerate involved in luxury textiles. I scrolled through the ledgers, my eyes scanning for the anomalies I had trained myself to see. For the first 3 hours, it was routine work. I flagged a few duplicate payments and some questionable travel expenses, but then I hit the shipping manifest for a subsidiary called Blue Heron Logistics. Something about the shipping weights did not add up. According to the data, Blue Heron was shipping raw silk from Southeast Asia to a processing plant in New Jersey. The manifest listed the cargo weight as 4,000 pounds per container. However, the fuel surcharge paid to the trucking company that moved the containers from the port was calculated for a load of only 2,000 pounds. Where did the other 2,000 pounds go? Or rather, did it ever exist? I dug deeper. I pulled the tax ID for Blue Heron Logistics. It was registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. That was common. But the authorized signatory on the incorporation documents was a man named Arthur Vane. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, violent rhythm that disrupted the cool silence of my office. Arthur Vane was not a logistics expert. Arthur Vane was the name of the family butler who had worked for the Whitfields for 30 years before retiring to Florida. He was a senile old man who likely didn't even know his name was being used to sign federal documents. I bypassed the redaction protocols. I had written a backdoor script for exactly this purpose. A small piece of code that could peel back the privacy layers of the Veritas system if I needed to verify a conflict of interest. I executed the script. The name of the parent company flickered onto my screen, Whitfield Global Industries. I sat back in my chair, the breath leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. I was auditing my own family. It was a coincidence, a twist of fate orchestrated by the universe. The board of Whitfield Global, likely the independent directors, had hired Veritas to look into leaking profits, unbeknownst to my father or Marcus, and Veritas had assigned the case to their best forensic auditor, me. I stared at the screen. This was the moment where professional ethics dictated I stand up, walk to the partner's office, and recuse myself. I should say that I had a personal connection. They would reassign the file. I would be safe. I reached for the phone. Then I remembered the text message. A lowly single mom. A stain. I remembered Marcus laughing at my poverty. I remembered Victoria erasing me. I put the phone down. I was not investigating them as a daughter. I was investigating them as the ghost auditor. If they had nothing to hide, my report would be clean. If they were criminals, well, the math would not lie. I dove back into the data. This time, I didn't just look. I dissected. The pattern emerged within 2 hours. It was elegant in its simplicity and crude in its execution. Marcus was not just losing money in crypto, he was stealing from the company to cover his margin calls. He was using Blue Heron Logistics to create fake invoices for raw materials that were never ordered. The company paid the invoices. The money went to the shell company in Delaware. From there, it was funneled into a digital wallet that I traced, through a series of hops, to an exchange account registered under a pseudonym I knew Marcus used for his online gaming, King Midas 88. But it wasn't just Marcus. I found a second stream of irregularity. The charitable donations from the company to Serena's sanctuary were being written off as marketing expenses. That was tax fraud. Furthermore, the money going into the charity was immediately flowing out to a consulting firm owned by Victoria Whitfield. They were looting their own empire. They were stripping the copper wiring out of the walls of the house my grandfather had built. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a surge of cold, hard adrenaline. This was not just family drama. This was federal crime. This was money laundering. This was tax evasion. I compiled the initial findings. I had enough to bury them. I had enough to send Marcus to prison for 10 years. The sun had set outside. The city was a grid of amber and white lights. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the school app. State Coding Championship. Final results. I unlocked the phone. A picture filled the screen. It was Leo. He was standing on a stage, holding a trophy that was half the size of his body. He was grinning, his front tooth slightly crooked, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated pride. First place. Leo Whitfield. Age 11. I smiled. The darkness in my chest receded for a moment. I packed up my bag. I saved the Whitfield file to an encrypted drive that I wore around my neck. I did not leave it on the server. When I got home, Leo was waiting for me. He was vibrating with energy. The trophy was placed in the center of the kitchen table, right next to the salt and pepper shakers. "I did it, Mom," he shouted as I walked in. "I beat the 8th graders. My algorithm for the pathfinding maze was 0.4 seconds faster than anyone else." I dropped my bag and scooped him up, spinning him around. He was getting heavy now, too big to carry, but I didn't care. "I knew you would," I said, kissing his cheek. "You are brilliant. You are unstoppable." We ordered pizza to celebrate, pepperoni and extra cheese. We drank sparkling apple juice out of wine glasses I had bought at IKEA. As we ate, Leo looked at the trophy, then at me. His expression turned serious. "Mom?" he asked. "Yes? Champion? Do you think—" He hesitated, tracing the rim of his glass. "Do you think we should tell Grandpa and Grandma? Maybe if they knew I won, if they knew I was smart, maybe they wouldn't think we are stains anymore." My heart broke a little. Even after 3 years, the child inside him still craved the approval of the people who had discarded him. He still thought his worth was something he had to prove to them. I put down my slice of pizza. I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were long and slender, pianist fingers, coder fingers. "Leo, look at me," I said. He met my gaze. "You won that trophy because you worked hard." I told him. "You studied Python while other kids were watching cartoons. You built that code line by line. You did that for yourself, not for them." "But wouldn't they be proud?" he asked. "They wouldn't understand it," I said gently. "They would look at that trophy and wonder how much gold is in the paint. They would ask why you didn't win a tennis match instead. They are deaf to the things that actually matter." I squeezed his hand. "Success is the loudest voice. Leo," I said, reciting the mantra I had repeated to myself 1,000 times in the dark. "You do not need to scream at the deaf. You just keep winning. Eventually, the ground will shake so hard from your success that they will feel it even if they cannot hear it." He nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand. Not yet. But he trusted me. "Okay, we keep it for us." "Goi. For us?" I agreed, the next morning. I returned to the office. The encrypted drive felt heavy against my skin. I was in the break room making coffee when Julian, a senior partner in the risk management division, walked in. Julian was a man who knew everything that happened in the building. He had eyes like a hawk and a smile that never reached them. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and stood next to me. "I saw the logs," he said softly. He didn't look at me. He looked at the coffee machine. "You accessed the back end of Case 409. I didn't flinch. I needed to verify a data discrepancy. "You know who the client is," Julian said. It wasn't a question. "I know. And you know who the target is." "I do." Julian turned to face me. The fluorescent light reflected off his rimless glasses. "Natalia," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I do not know your history with them. I do not want to know. But I know that family. Richard Whitfield eats people like you for breakfast. If you pursue this, if you turn this audit into a weapon, you are poking a sleeping dragon. They have lawyers who cost more than this entire building. They have connections in the Senate. If you miss, even by an inch, they will destroy your career. They will bury you." I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, just the way I liked it. I thought of Marcus stealing from shareholders. I thought of Serena using charity money for facials. I thought of Victoria calling my son a stain. "Julian," I said, turning to him with a smile that was sharp enough to cut glass. "You are mistaken about the dragon. How so? He asked. They are not the dragon, I said, walking toward the door. They are just the villagers who have been stealing gold. I am the dragon. I walked back to my office and closed the door. I inserted the drive. I opened the file. I wasn't just going to audit them. I was going to dissect them. I was going to document every cent, every lie, every fraudulent transaction. I was going to build a cage out of their own greed, and I was going to lock them inside it. The investigation had officially begun. Fame is a funny thing. In the world of high finance, true power is not found on the cover of Forbes magazine with a glossy smile and a motivational quote. True power is being the person the people on the cover are terrified of. 3 months into my deep dive investigation, my professional alias, the ghost auditor, was featured in a 4-page spread in Business Insider. The headline read, "The Invisible Hand: How One Analyst is Reshaping Corporate Accountability." There was no photograph. There was no biography. There was just a breakdown of my methodology, a description of how I had single-handedly exposed a $200 million embezzlement scheme in a pharmaceutical giant the previous quarter. The article described me as a mathematical savant with the predatory instincts of a shark. I read it while eating oatmeal in my kitchen. Leo sitting opposite me, struggling with a math problem about apples and oranges. I found the description hilarious. I wasn't a shark. Sharks are mindless eating machines. I was a surgeon. I just happened to be operating on cancer that looked a lot like my family. Meanwhile, across the country in the gilded cage of Manhattan, the Whitfield family was discovering a very uncomfortable truth. Being rich is expensive. My mother, Victoria, had always operated on the assumption that money was a renewable resource, like sunlight or her own sense of self-importance. But the well was running dry. Marcus's crypto disasters and Serena's PR crisis bills were draining the liquid cash faster than the dividends could replenish it. I could see it all on my monitors. I watched as they maxed out the platinum credit card to pay for the catering deposit for the upcoming spring equinox party. I watched as a payment for the maintenance of the family yacht. The legacy bounced due to insufficient funds. It was pathetic. It was the financial equivalent of a drowning man worrying about getting his hair wet. And then, inevitability struck. Victoria remembered she had a daughter. She didn't remember me because she missed me. She didn't wake up in the middle of the night clutching a baby blanket, weeping for the grandchild she had discarded. No, she remembered me because her accountant had just charged her $15,000 for a quarterly review, and she realized that I used to do that work for free. I knew the moment they decided to look for me because I had flagged my own name in the National Private Investigator database. They hired a man named Detective Miller. He was a budget investigator, the kind who worked out of a strip mall in Queens. If they had real money, they would have hired a firm like Kroll, but they went cheap. That was their tell. Miller was efficient enough. It took him 3 days to track my social security number to the payroll department of Veritas Horizon. I can only imagine the conversation that took place in the Whitfield drawing room when the report came back. "She is working where?" Victoria would have asked, clutching her pearls. "Veritas Horizon," Miller would have said. "She is a senior partner. She owns a condo in the city. She drives a Volvo. She is thriving." This must have broken their brains. In the Whitfield narrative, I was the failure. I was the stain. I was supposed to be living in a trailer park, regretting my life choices, waiting for them to save me. The fact that I was successful was not a cause for celebration. It was an insult. It meant their rejection had not destroyed me. It meant I didn't need them. And to a narcissist, being unneeded is a fate worse than death. 2 days later, the email arrived. It landed in my personal inbox at 10 o'clock in the morning. The subject line was simply, "Family." I opened it. The audacity was so thick I could almost taste it. "Dearest Natalia, it has been too long. I have been thinking about you and little Leo. Time heals all wounds, doesn't it? I have decided to be the bigger person and forgive your silence. Your father's birthday is coming up next month. We want you to come home. We miss you. Also, we need to have an adult conversation about the future of the estate. There are some financial complexities that requires a family touch. And we know you have always been good with numbers. Let us put the past behind us. We are, after all, Whitfields. Love, Mom. I sat back in my ergonomic chair and laughed. A cold, dry laugh that startled my assistant, who was watering the plants in the corner. She forgave my silence. She decided to be the bigger person. She didn't apologize for calling me a stain. She didn't ask how Leo was doing in school. She didn't offer to pay back the emotional debt she had accrued over 30 years. She just whistled, expecting the dog to come running back because she had a use for it. She wanted me to fix the mess Marcus had made. She wanted free labor. She wanted to pull me back into the toxicity so she could feed off my energy again. I moved the cursor over the reply button. I hovered there for a second. I could tell her to go to hell. I could tell her I knew about the Cayman accounts, but that would be emotional. That would be giving her what she wanted. A reaction. Instead, I clicked forward. I sent the email to a secure folder on my encrypted drive labeled Exhibit B, Manipulation and Coercion. I did not reply. My silence must have been deafening in New York. 24 hours passed, then 48, when the carrot didn't work. They reached for the stick. My phone buzzed on my desk. It was a text message. The number was unlisted, but I knew the cadence of the typing. It was Marcus. Don't think you are special just because you have a little job in Chicago. Mom might be soft, but I know what you are. You are still the ugly duckling. You are still a nobody. If you know what is good for you, you will answer her email and send us some money. We know where you live. I stared at the screen. Ugly duckling. He had called me that when we were teenagers. Usually right before he shoved me into a locker or stole my allowance. He was 38 years old, and he was still operating with the emotional maturity of a playground bully. He thought he was intimidating me. He didn't realize he was texting the person who held the kill switch to his entire financial existence. I could have destroyed him then. I could have leaked the Blue Heron Logistics invoices to the SEC that afternoon. I could have had him arrested before dinner, but I was playing the long game. The trap wasn't fully set yet. I needed him to be desperate. I needed him to be reckless. I opened the message. I went to the settings and turned on Read Receipts. Then, I typed nothing. I just let the little read notification appear on his phone. Seen, that was it. One word. Passive and devastating. It said, I see you, and you are beneath a response. It said, your threats are irrelevant. It said, I am not afraid. I knew Marcus. I knew that silence would eat him alive. He needed conflict to feel important. By denying him the fight, I was denying his existence, and I was right. According to my monitoring of his digital footprint, Marcus spiraled. At 3 o'clock in the morning that night, fueled by rage and likely a significant amount of cocaine. Marcus logged into his trading account. He was angry. He wanted to prove he was the genius, the provider, the real Whitfield. He liquidated a secure bond fund that was supposed to cover the company's tax liability for the coming fiscal year. It was $2 million of safe, boring money. He dumped it all into a high-risk, leveraged short position on a volatile tech stock. He was gambling. He was trying to turn $2 million into $10 million overnight so he could throw it in my face. He wanted to buy my obedience. I watched the transaction happen in real time. I was sitting in my living room, Leo asleep in his room, a cup of herbal tea in my hand. I saw the trade execute. Oh, Marcus, I whispered to the empty room. You just violated 3 federal banking regulations and committed corporate embezzlement. Again. I didn't stop him. I didn't call the bank. I simply took a screenshot. I added it to the file. The file was getting thick now. It contained wire transfers, fake invoices, threatening texts, and manipulative emails. It was no longer just an audit. It was an indictment. It was a dossier of moral and financial bankruptcy. I closed my laptop. I felt a strange sense of calm. The bait had been taken. The hook was set. They wanted Natalia the victim. They wanted Natalia the daughter. They were going to get Natalia the executioner. I went to check on Leo. He was sleeping with his mouth slightly open, one arm thrown over his head. The moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the trophy on his shelf. I kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, my love," I whispered. "Mommy is just finishing a game of chess." The next morning, I called my lawyer, not the corporate counsel at Veritas, but my personal attorney, a woman named Sarah, who was as vicious as a badger and twice as smart. "Is it time?" Sarah asked, when she saw my caller ID. "Not quite," I said, looking at the calendar. "The winter gala is over, but the shareholders' meeting is in 2 weeks. Marcus will try to hide the missing $2 million before then. He will panic. He will make a bigger mistake. And when he does?" "When he does," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth, "we initiate the checkmate." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window of my office and looked down at the people walking on the street below. They looked like ants. My family thought they were gods. They thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn that even gods can bleed if you know exactly where to cut. I went back to work. I had numbers to crunch. The Global Economic Summit in Chicago was the kind of event where the air conditioning was set to 68 degrees. But everyone was sweating. It was a congregation of wolves, sharks, and the occasional sheep who had wandered in by mistake. The air smelled of expensive cologne, ozone from the server farms running the presentations, and the metallic tang of desperate ambition. I stood in the wings of the main stage. Checking my reflection in the dark glass of a teleprompter, I looked different. The woman who had counted pennies for pasta sauce 3 years ago was gone. In her place stood a woman wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that had been tailored in Milan. The fabric was so fine it felt like water against my skin. My hair was pulled back into a severe, architectural bun, exposing the sharp line of my jaw and the diamond studs in my ears. I looked like money. Not the loud, gaudy money of the Whitfield family, but the quiet, terrifying money of the people who audited them. I checked my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a gift to myself after I closed the pharmaceutical case. It was 1:45 in the afternoon. My keynote speech was scheduled for 2 o'clock. I knew they were here. The guest list for the summit had been public for weeks. Whitfield Global Industries had purchased a platinum table. A desperate investment of $50,000 they definitely did not have. They were here to hunt. My father, Richard, and my brother, Marcus, were likely prowling the exhibition floor right now, trying to secure a lifeline from venture capitalists who were too polite to tell them their business model was a relic of the 1990s. They did not know I was the keynote speaker. The program simply listed the Ghost Auditor, Senior Partner, Veritas Horizon. It was a pseudonym I had cultivated carefully. To them, Natalia Whitfield was probably wiping tables in a diner or answering phones in a basement. I needed a moment of silence before the performance. I turned away from the stage and walked toward the private VIP restrooms located near the donor lounge. The restroom was an expanse of marble and gold fixtures, quiet and sterile. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap. The water was ice cold. I let it run over my wrists, calming the adrenaline that was spiking in my blood. The door opened behind me. I did not turn around immediately. I reached for a paper towel, drying my hands with slow, deliberate movements. I saw them in the mirror before they saw me. Victoria Whitfield walked in first, adjusting a brooch on her lapel that I knew was a fake. She had sold the real one 2 years ago. I had seen the auction records. Behind her trailed Serena, my sister, scrolling frantically on her phone, her face illuminated by the blue light. "I cannot believe we have to use the public restroom," Serena was complaining, her voice echoing off the marble. "The VIP lounge is full of old men smoking cigars. It is disgusting. And did you see the way that hedge fund manager looked at my dress? Like it was last season." "Hush, Serena," Victoria snapped, applying lipstick in the mirror 2 sinks down from me. "We are here to work. Your father needs to close a deal with the Saudi delegation by 5 o'clock, or we are in trouble. Fix your hair. You look like you just woke up." I stood perfectly still. They hadn't looked at me yet. To them, I was just another woman in a suit, part of the scenery, invisible. I turned slowly. "Hello, Mother?" I said. "Hello, Serena." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if I had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Victoria dropped her lipstick. It clattered into the porcelain sink, leaving a streak of red like a fresh wound. Serena froze, her phone halfway to her ear. They stared at me. They took in the suit. They took in the watch. They took in the way I stood, not with the slumped shoulders of a failure, but with the spine of a predator. "Natalia?" Victoria whispered. Her voice was a mixture of confusion and horror. She blinked, as if trying to clear a hallucination. "What are you doing here?" "I am attending the summit," I said, my voice smooth and cool. Serena recovered first. Her eyes narrowed. Scanning me up and down, she let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded brittle. "You? Attending?" Serena scoffed. She took a step closer, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. "Did you sneak in? Or are you working catering? No, wait, did you win the lottery? Or maybe you found some senile sugar daddy to buy you a ticket? Because I know you cannot afford the entrance fee. It is $5,000 a head." She reached out and flicked the lapel of my jacket. It was a dismissive, disrespectful gesture. "Nice knockoff," she sneered. "Tragically, it looks almost real, but the cut is too aggressive. A lady doesn't wear armor, Natalia, but I guess you wouldn't know that. You look hard." I looked at her hand, then up at her eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I just smiled, a small, terrifying curving of my lips. "It is not a knockoff, Serena," I said softly. "It is bespoke, and regarding the cost, this jacket alone costs more than the entire failed PR campaign you launched last month to cover up your charity fraud." Serena gasped. Her hand recoiled as if she had touched a hot stove. Her face went pale beneath her heavy foundation. "How do you know about that?" she stammered. "I know a lot of things," I said, turning my gaze to Victoria. "I know about the PR firm in D.C. I know about the wire transfer on November 3rd. I know that you are currently floating a line of credit from 3 different banks just to keep the lights on at the Hamptons house." Victoria straightened her spine. The shock was fading, replaced by the instinctive, towering arrogance of a matriarch who was used to being obeyed. She stepped forward. Trying to use her height to intimidate me, it didn't work. I had grown 3 inches in confidence since the last time she saw me. "You listen to me," Victoria hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "I do not know who you think you are. Speaking to your sister like that, you are an ungrateful, spiteful little girl. If you have money, you should be helping this family, not mocking us." She took a breath, composing herself. She smoothed her skirt. "We are staying at the Four Seasons," she commanded, her tone shifting to one of icy authority. "Room 402. You will come there after this event. We need to have a serious talk about your responsibilities. Your father is stressed, and your brother needs capital. If you have stumbled into some money, we will discuss how best to allocate it. Do not make me wait. Natalia, it is time you paid your dues." It was breathtaking. The delusion was so complete, so impenetrable, that it was almost admirable. She truly believed she still owned me. I looked at my watch again. "I have to go," I said. "I have a schedule to keep." "I did not dismiss you," Victoria shouted, her voice cracking. "You will not walk away from me. I am your mother." I paused at the door. I looked back at them. 2 desperate women in a marble bathroom, clinging to a power they had lost years ago. "You are not my mother," I said, my voice low. "You are just a woman with lipstick on her teeth." I walked out. I didn't look back. I heard Victoria shriek my name, but the heavy oak door swallowed the sound. I walked down the long corridor toward the main ballroom. My heart was beating steadily. I felt light. I felt clean. The confrontation hadn't drained me. It had fueled me. I reached the backstage area just as the lights in the main hall dimmed. The murmur of 2,000 people fell silent. The master of ceremonies walked to the podium. His voice boomed through the massive speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests," he announced, Please welcome our keynote speaker for the afternoon. She is the industry's leading expert on forensic accounting and corporate transparency, a senior partner at Veritas Horizon. Please welcome Ms. Natalia Whitfield. The applause started as a polite ripple and grew into a wave. I walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit me, blinding and warm. I walked to the center podium, placing my notes down. I looked out into the darkness. Because of the stage lighting, I couldn't see individual faces in the back, but I knew exactly where the platinum tables were. They were in the front row, center stage. My eyes adjusted, and there they were. Richard Whitfield was sitting with a glass of water halfway to his mouth. He was frozen. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like he was having a stroke. Marcus was sitting next to him. He had dropped his phone. He was staring up at me with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. It was the look of a man who sees the executioner and realizes the axe is already falling. Victoria and Serena were just rushing to their seats, breathless from the bathroom encounter. They looked up. They saw me on the giant screens flanking the stage. They saw my title in 10-foot-tall letters, Natalia Whitfield, the ghost auditor. Victoria collapsed into her chair. Serena put a hand over her mouth. I smiled. This time, it was genuine. "Good afternoon," I said into the microphone. My voice was amplified, crisp and authoritative, filling every corner of the room. "Thank you for having me." I paused, letting the silence stretch for 3 seconds. I locked eyes with my father. "Today," I began, "I want to talk about a concept that is often discussed but rarely practiced. Transparency." I clicked the clicker in my hand. The screen behind me changed to a graphic of a rotting apple with a shiny skin. "We live in an era of image," I continued, pacing slowly across the stage. "Companies spend millions of dollars polishing their exterior. They hire PR firms. They host galas. They wear expensive suits. They tell you that they are too big to fail. They tell you that their legacy is ironclad." I looked directly at Marcus. He flinched. "But as a forensic auditor, I do not look at the suit," I said. "I look at the ledger, and the ledger never lies." I clicked the slide again. A complex diagram of a shell company structure appeared. It was generic, but it bore a striking structural resemblance to the Blue Heron logistics scheme. "There is a price for deceit," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming darker. "When a family excuse me, when a corporation chooses to hide its rot rather than cure it, they are not saving themselves. They are merely compounding the interest on their eventual destruction." The room was silent. The audience was captivated. They thought I was speaking in metaphors. They thought I was giving a philosophical lecture on business ethics. But the 4 people in the front row knew better. They knew I was speaking a specific language. I was speaking to them. "I have seen companies," I said, walking to the edge of the stage, looming over them, "where the leadership believes that their status protects them from consequences. They believe they can treat their stakeholders like stains." Richard flinched at the word. "They believe they can wash away the truth," I said. "But the truth is stubborn. It leaves a mark, and sooner or later, someone like me comes along, someone who knows where to look, someone who knows the difference between a profit and a Ponzi scheme." I saw Marcus lean over and whisper frantically to Richard. Richard shoved him away, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked pale, sweaty, and small. For the first time in my life, I realized he wasn't a giant. He was just a thief in a tailored suit. "The ghost auditor is not here to haunt you," I said, delivering the closing line of my introduction. "I am here to wake you up, because when the lights turn on, the monsters in the closet have nowhere left to hide." I went on for 40 minutes. I dissected the anatomy of fraud. I explained how charitable foundations are used for tax evasion. I explained how cryptocurrency is used to hide losses. I used hypothetical examples that matched the Whitfield crimes almost dollar for dollar. Every sentence was a slap in the face. Every statistic was a dagger. By the time I finished, the audience was on its feet. The applause was thunderous. But in the front row, the Whitfield family remained seated. They looked like statues carved from ash. They didn't clap. They didn't move. They just stared at me, paralyzed by the sudden, horrific realization that the daughter they had thrown away had returned not to beg for scraps, but to burn the kingdom down. I nodded to the crowd, gathered my notes, and walked off stage. My hands were not shaking. My breathing was even. I walked past the stunned stage manager and out the back exit. I had a meeting with the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2 days, and I needed to prepare the final paperwork. The warning shot had been fired. The war had begun. The silence that followed the Global Economic Summit did not last long. In fact, it lasted exactly 12 hours. That was how long it took for the Whitfield family to realize that their strategy of intimidation had failed spectacularly. I had not just walked out of their trap. I had dismantled it and built a fortress on top of the wreckage. So, like a virus adapting to a vaccine, they mutated. They stopped trying to crush me. They started trying to own me. The assault began the next morning, not with threats, but with a weapon far more insidious: affection. I was sitting at my desk at Veritas Horizon, reviewing the final compliance reports for a client in the automotive sector. When my assistant, Sarah, walked in, she looked confused. She was carrying a flower arrangement that was so large it practically obscured her entire upper body. It was a monstrosity of white orchids, imported lilies, and gold-dusted roses. It must have cost at least $800. "Delivery for you, Ms. Whitfield," Sarah said, setting the vase down on the coffee table. "There is no card inside, just a tag that says family." I stared at the flowers. They smelled like a funeral. "Get them out," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Excuse me?" Sarah asked. "Donate them to the hospital down the street," I said, typing a command into my terminal. "If they do not want them, throw them in the dumpster. Do not let them stay in this office for another minute." Sarah nodded, sensing the ice in my voice, and hauled the arrangement away. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was a notification from Instagram, then another, then 50 more. I opened the app. My stomach turned. My mother, Victoria, had posted a photograph. It was an old picture, taken 15 years ago at my high school graduation. In the photo, she was smiling her practiced, pageant queen smile, her hand resting possessively on my shoulder. I looked young, naive, and desperate for her approval. The caption read, "So incredibly proud of our darling Natalia." Watching her shine on the main stage at the Economic Summit yesterday brought tears to my eyes. Once a Whitfield, always a Whitfield. We have missed you so much. Sweetie, come home soon. Proud mom. Family first unconditional. Love, it was a masterclass in gaslighting. There was no mention of the lowly single mom text, no mention of the years of silence, no mention of the fact that she had tried to ambush me in a bathroom stall less than 24 hours ago. She was rewriting history in real time, positioning herself as the supportive matriarch of a prodigal daughter. The comments were already pouring in. "What a beautiful family. I didn't know the ghost auditor was your daughter. Brilliance runs in the genes. So touching to see you supporting her." I felt a surge of bile in my throat. They were using my success, the very success I had built in spite of them, to polish their own tarnished reputation. They were leeching off my credibility to secure the loans they so desperately needed. I did not comment. I did not like the photo. I simply took a screenshot and dragged it into the folder labeled Exhibit C, Public Manipulation. The gifts kept coming. By noon, a courier arrived with a limited edition leather handbag from Hermes. By 2 o'clock, a box of artisanal truffles arrived from a chocolatier in Paris. By 4 o'clock, a case of vintage Dom Perignon was delivered to the front desk. "Send it all back," I told the receptionist. "If they refuse to take it, give it to the cleaning staff." I was not going to be bought. I was not going to let them erase 3 years of neglect with a few expensive trinkets charged to a credit card that was likely maxed out. Then, the tactics shifted again. Desperation makes people sloppy, and my father, Richard, had never been a man of subtle maneuvers. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the private line on my desk rang. This number was unlisted. Only my top clients and the partners at Veritas had it. I picked it up. Natalia Whitfield. Natalia. The voice was raspy, weak, trembling with exertion. It was my father. "How did you get this number?" I asked, my voice flat. "It doesn't matter," he wheezed. "Natalia, listen to me. I am in the hospital. My chest. The doctors say it is angina, maybe a mild attack. The stress seeing you yesterday was too much." I paused. A normal daughter would have panicked. A normal daughter would have felt a spike of guilt. But I was not a normal daughter anymore. I was an auditor. "Which hospital are you at, Richard?" I asked. I did not call him Dad. "Mount Sinai," he groaned. "In New York. I flew back this morning. Please, Natalia, I need to see you. Before it is too late. Just come home. We can sign the papers for the trust fund. I want to make sure you and Leo are taken care of." There it was. The hook. Sign the papers. My fingers flew across my keyboard. I didn't need to hack anything illegal. I just needed to check the public transactional data that I had legitimate access to as a licensed investigator. "Hold on 1 second, I said calmly. I pulled up the credit card activity for his primary Amex Black Card. 2 minutes ago, a charge for $22. "That is strange," I said into the receiver. "You are at Mount Sinai Hospital in the cardiac unit?" "Yes," he coughed. "I am in agony." "Then why did your credit card just pay for a double scotch and a bucket of range balls at the Pine Hollow Country Club in New Jersey?" The line went dead silent. The wheezing stopped instantly. I can actually see the GPS tag on the transaction. "Richard," I continued, my voice sharp as a razor, "you are not in a hospital bed. You are at the 19th hole. You are trying to guilt-trip me into coming back so you can leverage my signature for a loan. It is pathetic. You ungrateful little witch." His voice boomed, the sickness vanishing instantly, replaced by his trademark rage. "I gave you life. You owe me. You think you are so smart with your computers? You are nothing. You are still just the girl who couldn't keep a husband." "Goodbye, Richard," I said. I hung up. My hand was steady, but my heart was pounding against my ribs. They were relentless. They had no bottom. But the worst was yet to come. I had anticipated they would come for me. I had anticipated they would lie. But I had underestimated just how low Marcus was willing to sink. I received a call from Leo's school at 10 in the morning the next day. It was the principal, Mrs. Higgins. Her voice was tight with anxiety. "Ms. Whitfield, we have a situation," she said. "We have police on the premises." My blood turned to ice. "Is Leo okay?" "Leo is fine," she said quickly. "He is safe in my office, but a man tried to pick him up during recess. He claimed to be his uncle." I was out of my chair and running toward the elevator before she finished the sentence. "I am on my way," I said. "Do not let that man leave." I drove to the school in 12 minutes. Ignoring 3 red lights, when I arrived, there were 2 patrol cars in the parking lot. I burst into the principal's office. Leo was sitting on a chair, drinking a juice box. He looked calm, almost bored. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Mom," he said, "I used the protocol." I hugged him so hard I thought I might crack a rib. I checked him for injuries. He was perfect. He was safe. "Tell me what happened," I commanded, turning to the principal and the police officer standing nearby. "The gentleman, a Mr. Marcus Whitfield, approached the fence during recess," the officer explained, looking at his notepad. "He called out to your son. He had a brand new PlayStation 5 in a box. He told Leo that his mother, meaning you, had been in a car accident and that he needed to go with him to the hospital immediately." My vision went red. It was a physical reaction, a wave of pure, homicidal rage. Marcus had used the idea of my death to try and lure my son into a car. It was kidnapping. It was coercion. It was evil. And what did Leo do? I asked, looking at my son. Leo sat up straighter. I asked him for the code word. I smiled. A fierce, predatory pride swelled in my chest. We had practiced this. Since the day we left New York, I had taught Leo that if anyone ever tried to pick him up claiming I sent them, they had to know the code word. He didn't know it, Leo said, shrugging. He said, "Don't be stupid, kid. Get in the car." So I stepped back. I yelled "stranger danger" really loud like you taught me, and I ran to the teacher on duty. Then the security guard came, and the man ran away. He dropped the PlayStation. He fled the scene, the officer confirmed. We have the license plate. It matches a rental car registered to Marcus Whitfield. I want to file charges, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. Attempted kidnapping, harassment, stalking. We can file a report, the officer said. But without him actually physically grabbing the child, it is hard to make a kidnapping charge stick, especially since he is a biological relative. However, we can certainly issue a restraining order. Do it, I said. And I want it served today. I want it served to his face. I took Leo home. I did not go back to work. I spent the afternoon drafting a legal document that was less of a restraining order and more of a declaration of war. I hired a private process server to deliver the temporary restraining order to the Whitfield penthouse in Manhattan. The order barred them from coming within 500 feet of me, my son, my home, or my place of business. It was aggressive. It was public. And it was the spark that ignited the powder keg. The Whitfields realized they couldn't charm me, and they couldn't kidnap my son. So, they decided to destroy me. They went to the press, but they didn't go to the financial press, where I had credibility. They went to the tabloids. They went to the daytime talk shows. They went to the bottom feeders of the media world. 2 days after the incident at the school, the story broke. Heartless daughter abandons dying father. The headline was splashed across the front page of a popular gossip site. Below it was a picture of Richard, looking frail, likely using makeup, and lying in a hospital bed, which I knew was staged. The article was a work of fiction so elaborate it belonged in a library. It claimed that I, Natalia Whitfield, had stolen money from the family estate, run away to Chicago, and was now refusing to let my elderly, sick parents see their only grandchild. It claimed that Victoria had reached out with olive branches, gifts, and love, only to be met with cruel silence and legal threats. They quoted Marcus. "We just want to be a family again. My sister has changed. She cares more about money now than her own flesh and blood. We are worried about her mental state. We are worried about Leo." It was a strategic nuclear strike on my character. I watched as the public opinion began to shift. The comments section on the article was brutal. How can a daughter be so cold? Rich people problems, but still, denying a dying man his grandson is evil. I used to admire the ghost auditor, but this is messy. She sounds like a sociopath. My phone began to ring with calls from reporters. My email at Veritas Horizon was flooded with hate mail. "Ms. Whitfield," the managing partner of Veritas said to me the next morning. He looked concerned. "This is becoming a distraction. The firm's reputation is being dragged into a domestic dispute. Clients are asking questions." I stood in his office, looking out at the skyline. I felt the walls closing in. They were trying to isolate me. They were trying to make me toxic so that I would lose my job, lose my power, and be forced to crawl back to them for survival. It was a good plan. If I were the old Natalia, I would have broken. I would have issued a tearful apology. But they had forgotten one thing. I had the files. I had the Blue Heron invoices. I had the evidence of the charity fraud. I had the GPS logs of Richard at the golf course. They were fighting with mud. I was sitting on a stockpile of dynamite. I looked at the partner. "Give me 24 hours, I said. "I will end this, permanently." "How?" he asked. "They want a public spectacle?" I said, my eyes narrowing. "I am going to give them one. They accused me of stealing. I am going to show the world who the real thieves are. I walked back to my office. I called my lawyer. Sarah, I said, get the paperwork ready for the SEC filing and call the producers of the show where my mother is scheduled to appear tomorrow. Tell them I want to exercise my right of reply. Are you sure? Sarah asked. It will be a bloodbath. No, Sarah, I said, opening the file named Project Stain. It will not be a bloodbath. It will be an execution. The fallout from the tabloid hit piece was exactly what a seasoned strategist would call acceptable collateral damage, but that did not make it pleasant. In the sterilized, high-stakes world of Veritas Horizon, reputation was currency, and mine was currently experiencing a volatile fluctuation. Clients who had previously regarded me as a deity of fiscal responsibility were now looking at me with sideways glances. I could hear the whispers in the elevator. Is she really abandoning a dying father? Is she unstable? Can we trust her with the sensitive data of a Fortune 500 merger if she cannot even manage a family dispute? On Tuesday morning, Evelyn Vance, the managing partner who had hired me 3 years ago, walked into my office. She closed the door, a gesture that usually meant someone was getting fired or promoted. Natalia, she said, sitting on the edge of my desk, ignoring the ergonomic chair. We need to talk about the noise. I didn't look up from my monitor immediately. I was tracking the stock price of Whitfield Global Industries. It was trading at $42 a share, down 3% from the previous close. The noise is temporary, Evelyn, I said. It is just static. It is libel, Evelyn corrected, her voice sharp. Our legal team is ready to draft a cease and desist letter. We can sue the publication for defamation. We can sue your father for slander. We can release a statement clarifying that you are a top-tier professional who is being harassed. We can shut this down by noon. I finally looked at her. I saw genuine concern in her eyes. She respected me. She didn't want to see her star auditor dragged through the mud by a family of grifters. No, I said. Evelyn frowned. No? Natalia, they are butchering your character. If you stay silent, people assume the accusations are true. Silence is viewed as guilt in the court of public opinion. In the court of public opinion, yes, I agreed, standing up and walking to the window. But I am not trying to win in the court of public opinion. Evelyn, I am trying to win in federal court, and to do that, I need them to feel safe. I need them to feel like they are winning. I turned back to her, my expression void of any distress. If we sue them now, they retreat, I explained. They claim it was a misunderstanding. They settle out of court. They survive. I do not want them to survive. I want to use their own greed to bury them. Please, tell legal to stand down. Give me 48 hours. Evelyn studied me for a long moment. She saw the cold calculation in my eyes, the same look I had when I found the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands during my interview. She nodded slowly. 48 hours, she said. But if this impacts our billable hours, I am stepping in. Understood. Once she left, I turned back to the screen. I knew my family. I knew that when a bully lands a punch and the victim doesn't fight back, the bully doesn't stop. The bully escalates. They get drunk on their own perceived power. And right on cue, at 2:00 in the afternoon, the escalation arrived. It came in the form of a press release issued by the Investor Relations Department of Whitfield Global Industries. For immediate release, Whitfield Global announces strategic restructuring and asset merger. The board of directors is pleased to announce that Ms. Natalia Whitfield, formerly of Veritas Horizon, will be returning to the family enterprise in an executive financial capacity. Ms. Whitfield will be overseeing the consolidation of private assets to bolster the company's liquidity and drive future growth. This reunion marks a new era of stability and transparency for the Whitfield legacy. I read the text 3 times. I checked the source. It was official. It was on the wire services. It was on Bloomberg. I sat back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. They had lied. They had blatantly, publicly, and criminally lied. I had never agreed to return. I had never agreed to merge my assets. I had never spoken to the board of directors. In their desperation to stop the bleeding of their stock price, they had invented a savior. They were betting everything on the idea that I would be too embarrassed, or too pressured by the family unity narrative, to publicly humiliate them by denying it. They thought they could force my hand by announcing the marriage before I had even agreed to the date, but in doing so, they had committed a cardinal sin of the financial world. They had issued a materially false statement to influence the price of a publicly traded security. It was textbook market manipulation. It was a violation of the Securities Exchange Act, Rule 10b-5. I looked at the stock ticker on my second monitor. Whitfield Global, WGI. Up 4%, up 6%, up 8%. The market loved the news. The market trusted the name Natalia Whitfield and the reputation of the ghost auditor. Investors believed that if I was coming on board, the books were clean and the company was saved. They were buying the stock based on my credibility, which my family had just stolen. My phone began to ring. It was reporters asking for comment. It was headhunters asking if the rumors were true. I did not answer. I let the voicemail fill up. I let the stock rise. I watched it climb to $55 a share by the closing bell. The Whitfield family had just made millions of dollars in unrealized gains on paper in a single afternoon. They were probably popping champagne in the penthouse right now, toasting to their own genius. "See?" they would be saying. "We just had to claim her." And the money came back. But the trap was not just about the stock price. The trap was about liquidity. My brother, Marcus, was in a hole. A $4 million hole from his crypto gambling and his embezzlement. He needed cash immediately to cover his tracks before the end of the fiscal quarter, which was in 3 days. With the stock price inflated by the fake news, the value of his personal holdings in the company had just spiked. I logged into the dark web monitoring tool I used to track high-risk lending activity. It was a gray area of my profession, but necessary. I had tagged Marcus's digital identity months ago. At 7 o'clock that evening, a flag popped up. Marcus Whitfield had applied for an emergency bridge loan from a private equity lender in New Jersey, a lender known for high interest rates and minimal questions. He was using his Whitfield Global shares as collateral. Because the stock was up 12% on the day, the lender approved the loan. Transaction verified. $4,200,000 wired to account ending in 889. I smiled. It was the smile of a grandmaster who sees the opponent move their queen into the line of fire. Marcus had just borrowed real money against fake value. When I exposed the lie, the stock would crash. The collateral would become worthless. The lender would call the loan immediately. Marcus wouldn't be able to pay. He would be insolvent. And because he had obtained the loan based on fraudulent information, the press release, he had just committed bank fraud on top of securities fraud. He had dug his own grave, jumped in, and handed me the shovel. The final piece of their strategy arrived the next morning. A courier delivered a physical invitation to my office. It was heavy cream cardstock with gold leaf lettering. The Whitfield family cordially invites you to a gala of reunion and renewal, celebrating the return of our beloved daughter, Natalia. Saturday, the 28th of January, the Whitfield Estate, Long Island, 7 o'clock in the evening. It was a public coronation. They had invited the press. They had invited the shareholders. They were going to parade me around like a prize pony, forcing me to smile and nod while they announced my new role as CFO. If I didn't show up, they would spin it. "Look, she agreed to the merger, but she is too unstable to attend the party. She is having a breakdown. We will manage her assets for her." If I did show up, they thought I would be trapped by social convention, unable to make a scene in front of the New York elite. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number on the RSVP card. It was Victoria's personal assistant who answered. "Whitfield Residence. This is Natalia," I said. "Oh, Ms. Whitfield." The assistant sounded flustered. "Hold on. Your mother is right here." There was a shuffling sound, and then Victoria's voice came on the line. She sounded triumphant. She sounded like she had already won. "Natalia," she purred, "I knew you would come around. The stock price is marvelous, isn't it? We make a great team. You and I assume you received the invitation." "I did," I said. "And?" Victoria pressed. "The press is dying to see us together. We have set up a photo op on the grand staircase. Just like old times. You will wear something appropriate this time. I hope. No suits? A gown?" "I will be there, Mother," I said. "Good," she said. "And bring the boy. We need to show the heir. 7 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." She hung up without saying goodbye. She didn't need to, in her mind. The universe had corrected itself. The planets were back in alignment. The rebellious daughter had been brought to heel. I placed the phone back in its cradle. I went home early that day. The apartment was quiet. Leo was sitting at the kitchen table, building a complex structure out of magnetic tiles. He looked up when I walked in. He saw the invitation in my hand. He saw the gold lettering. He was 11 years old now, and he was sharper than most adults I knew. He knew what that font meant. "Are we going back?" he asked. His voice was small. I sat down next to him. "We are going to visit, on Saturday." "But they lied," Leo said, his brow furrowing. "I saw the news on my tablet. They said you are working for them again. They said we are a team. Why did they lie?" "Because they are greedy, Leo," I said. "And greedy people tell lies to get what they want. If we go to the party, doesn't that mean we agree with the lie?" he asked. "If you stand next to them, everyone will think it is true." I looked at my son. He was the moral compass I had fought so hard to protect. "Leo," I said softly, "do you remember when we had ants in the old apartment? Do you remember what we did?" "We put down the sweet stuff," Leo said. "The bait?" "Exactly," I said. "We gave them exactly what they wanted. We let them gather around the sugar. We let them think they had found a feast. And then? Then we trapped them," he whispered. "I am not going to that party to join them. Leo," I said, my eyes hardening. "I am not going to that party to drink champagne or wear a fancy dress. Then why are you going?" I stood up and walked to my home office. I opened the safe. I pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It was unassuming. It looked like something you would use to store homework. But inside that drive was 10 years of forensic data. It contained the Blue Heron invoices. It contained the crypto wallet addresses. It contained the emails Victoria had sent. It contained the proof of the fake press release and the subsequent stock pump. It was not just a file. It was a nuclear warhead. I held it up to the light. "I am going," I told my son, "because someone has to take out the trash." Leo looked at the USB drive, then at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "Can I wear my suit?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Wear the suit. You are going to want to look good for the pictures." The rest of the week was a blur of preparation. I did not speak to the press. I did not correct the rumors. I let the stock price hover at its inflated peak. I let Marcus spend the money he had borrowed. I let Victoria book the most expensive caterer in Manhattan. I was the silence in the eye of the hurricane. On Saturday morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock. I went for a run along the lakefront. The air was crisp and cold. I felt powerful. At 5 o'clock in the evening, the limousine I had hired arrived. It was not a Whitfield car. It was my car, paid for with my money. I dressed Leo in his navy blue suit. He looked handsome and serious. Then, I dressed myself. I did not wear the pastel gown Victoria had suggested. I wore a dress of midnight blue velvet. It was structured, sharp, and regal. It had a high neck and long sleeves. It was not a dress for a debutante. It was robes for a judge. I put the USB drive in my clutch purse. "Ready?" I asked Leo. "Ready," he said. We got into the car. The driver pulled away from the curb, heading toward the private airfield where a charter jet was waiting to take us to New York. The Whitfields were waiting for their prodigal daughter to return and save them. They were waiting for the lowly single mom to come back and balance their checkbooks. They had no idea. that the only thing I was bringing to the party was the end of their world. The Whitfield estate in the Hamptons was designed to intimidate. It sat on 6 acres of manicured lawn that ended abruptly at the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The house itself was a monstrosity of white marble and columns, lit up tonight by floodlights that turned the driveway into a runway. From the back seat of my armored town car, it did not look like a home. It looked like a mausoleum where happiness went to die. I looked at the seat next to me. It was empty, at the very last moment, standing on the tarmac in Chicago. I had made a decision. I had told Leo to go back to the car. I had looked at his small face, eager in his navy suit, and realized that I could not bring him into the lion's den. This was not a celebration. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. I had sent him to a secure hotel suite with 2 bodyguards and a promise that I would buy him the biggest Lego set in existence when I returned. He was safe. He was watching a movie. He was far away from the toxicity that was about to unfold. Instead of my son, Sarah sat next to me, my lawyer. She was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper intellect. She was reviewing the affidavit on her tablet one last time. "Are you ready?" she asked, not looking up. "Once we step out of this car, there is no going back. You are lighting a match in a room full of gasoline." "Let it burn," I said. The car stopped. The valet opened the door. The noise hit me first. It was a wall of sound. The clicking of 100 camera shutters, the shouting of reporters, the murmur of the crowd. The Whitfields had invited everyone. CNN was here. The Wall Street Journal was here. Even the gossip bloggers were here. They wanted the scoop of the decade, the prodigal daughter returning to save the crumbling empire. I stepped out. The flashbulbs blinded me for a second, turning the night into a strobe-lit nightmare. I adjusted my eyes. I was wearing the midnight blue velvet dress. It was heavy, structured, and modest. I wore no jewelry except for a simple pair of diamond studs. I did not look like a socialite. I looked like an executioner. Sarah stepped out behind me, clutching a leather briefcase. We walked up the grand staircase. The red carpet felt spongy beneath my heels. At the top of the stairs, framing the massive oak doors, stood my parents. Richard looked surprisingly well for a man who was supposedly dying in a hospital bed 2 days ago. He was standing upright, his skin flushed with makeup to hide the gray undertones of stress. But it was Victoria who commanded the scene. She was wearing a silver gown that cost more than my first apartment. Her hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet of blonde perfection. When she saw me, her face lit up with a performance that deserved an Oscar. "Natalia!" she cried out, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. She rushed forward, arms wide open. The cameras went wild. Click, 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 click. This was the money shot, the reunion, the healing. She threw her arms around me, to the cameras. It looked like a desperate, loving embrace, but I could feel the tension in her frame. Her fingers dug into my shoulders like claws. She pulled me close, pressing her cheek against mine so the photographers could get the perfect angle. Then, she whispered, "Smile, you ungrateful wretch." She hissed into my ear, her voice a low, venomous growl that the microphones couldn't pick up. "You look miserable. Fix your face. You are going to sign the loan guarantee for your brother tonight, or I will make sure the press destroys you tomorrow. We own the narrative now. Do not test me." I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I let her hold me. I let her think she had the upper hand. I turned my head slightly, bringing my lips to her ear. I kept my smile frozen, the industrial smile I used for difficult clients. "You have lipstick on your teeth, Victoria," I whispered back. I felt her stiffen. It was the one thing she couldn't tolerate: imperfection, a flaw in the facade. She pulled back immediately, her tongue darting out to check her teeth, her eyes darting nervously to the cameras. The moment of dominance was broken. She looked frantic, insecure. I walked past her, leaving her standing there wiping her mouth. "Shall we?" I said to Sarah. We entered the ballroom. If the outside was a circus, the inside was a gladiator arena disguised as a cocktail party. The room was suffocating, 500 guests were packed into a space meant for 300. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and heavy hors d'oeuvres. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden, hazy light over everything. It was the feast of vultures. I recognized faces in the crowd. There was the CEO of the bank that had just denied Marcus a loan last week. He was smiling now, probably thinking the merger made the risk acceptable. There was the senator who accepted donations from my father's shell companies. There were the social climbers, the hangers-on, the people who came to drink the free alcohol and watch the train wreck. They all turned to look at me. The room went quiet for a heartbeat. Then the whispers started. Is that her? She looks different. I heard she is worth $50 million on her own. They say she's going to be the new CFO. I walked through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't stop to shake hands. I walked straight toward the front of the room, where a raised stage had been set up. Sarah stayed one step behind me, a silent shadow. My brother, Marcus, was already on the stage. He looked manic. He was holding a glass of scotch in one hand and a microphone in the other. He was sweating. I could see the sheen of perspiration on his forehead even from 30 feet away. He was vibrating with a mixture of adrenaline and cocaine. When he saw me approaching, he grinned. It was a wolfish, predatory grin. He thought he had trapped me. He thought that by getting me into this room, surrounded by these people, he had checkmated me. He believed that social pressure was the strongest force in the universe. He believed that I would never dare to cause a scene in front of the right people. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus shouted into the microphone. The feedback squealed, making people wince. "May I have your attention, please?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the stage. "Tonight is a special night," Marcus began, swaying slightly. "Tonight is about family. It is about legacy. You all know the rumors. You have all seen the headlines. Well, I am here to tell you that the rumors are true." A ripple of applause went through the room. "My sister," Marcus said, gesturing grandly toward me as I reached the foot of the stage. "My baby sister, Natalia. She went away for a while. She had to find herself, but she has returned to the fold. She has realized that blood is thicker than water, and more importantly, she has realized that the Whitfield name is the only currency that matters." He laughed at his own joke. A few sycophants in the front row laughed with him. I walked up the stairs. My heels clicked on the wooden stage. I stood next to him. I was taller than him in my heels. I looked calm. He looked chaotic. "I am proud to announce," Marcus continued, his voice booming, "that effective immediately, Natalia Whitfield will be stepping in as the new Chief Financial Officer of Whitfield Global Industries. Her assets will be merged with the family trust to ensure that our vision for the future is fully funded. We are back, baby. We are bigger than ever." The applause was thunderous. The flashbulbs erupted again, a blinding wall of white light. They were cheering for the lie. They were cheering for the fraud. Marcus turned to me. He held out the microphone. His eyes were hard, daring me to defy him. "Say a few words, sis," he muttered off mic, his voice low and threatening. "Read the script. Don't do anything stupid. We have snipers." It was a metaphor. Of course, he didn't have snipers. He barely had security. But the threat was clear. Play along or die. I took the microphone. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt cold. The room waited. The applause died down. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I looked out at the crowd. I saw Victoria in the front row, checking her teeth in a compact mirror. I saw Richard clutching a glass of water, looking pale. I saw the faces of the investors, the bankers, the people who had called me a stain 3 years ago. They looked expectant. They wanted the fairy tale. They wanted the prodigal daughter to bow her head and kiss the ring. I looked at Marcus. He was smiling, but his eyes were darting nervously. I brought the microphone to my lips. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. My voice was steady, clear, and amplified to every corner of the estate. It is truly a revelation to be here tonight. I paused. My brother just told you that I am here to become the new CFO, I continued. He told you that I am merging my assets with the family trust. He told you that this is a new era of transparency. I looked directly into the camera lens of the CNBC crew, standing near the buffet table. He is right about one thing, I said. This is a new era of transparency. I took a breath. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I did not come here tonight to accept a job, I said, my voice dropping to a register of absolute, terrifying seriousness. I came here to inform you, the shareholders, and the press, that at 9 o'clock this morning, my legal counsel filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash, before the screaming starts. Marcus's smile froze. He looked like a wax figure melting in the heat. I have submitted over 5,000 pages of evidence, I continued, speaking faster now, driving the nails into the coffin. This evidence documents a decade of systemic fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement within Whitfield Global Industries. It includes proof that the press release issued 2 days ago regarding my employment was false and was used to artificially inflate the stock price, a direct violation of federal securities law. A gasp went through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out at once. I have also submitted proof, I said, turning to look at my mother, that the charitable foundation run by Victoria Whitfield has been used to launder money for personal expenses, including the catering for this very party. "Cut the mic!" Victoria screamed from the floor. "Cut the mic! She is crazy. She is off her meds." "I am not crazy." "Mother," I said, my voice cutting through her shrieking, "I am an auditor, and I have finished the audit." I looked at Marcus. "Your loan from the private equity firm in New Jersey? The one you secured yesterday using the inflated stock as collateral? That is bank fraud, Marcus, and since I just publicly debunked the value of that collateral, that money is now considered proceeds of crime," Marcus snapped. The realization hit him. The money was gone. The reputation was gone. The prison sentence was looming. He let out a primal roar. "You bitch!" He lunged at me. It happened in slow motion. I saw the madness in his eyes. He dropped his Scotch glass. It shattered on the stage. He reached for me, his hands hooked into claws, aiming for my throat. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to crush the stain, but he never reached me. 2 men in black suits, my private security detail, who had been waiting in the wings, stepped out of the shadows. They moved with a speed and efficiency that made Marcus look like a stumbling drunk. One of them caught Marcus's arm in midair. He twisted it behind his back. Marcus screamed as his shoulder joint popped. The other guard stepped in front of me, forming a human wall. "Get off me!" Marcus screamed, thrashing against the guard. "She is lying! Arrest her! She is the thief!" The crowd was in chaos. People were running toward the exits. Photographers were climbing over chairs to get the shot of the brother attacking the sister. It was pandemonium. It was the most unrefined, undignified moment in the history of the Hamptons. I stood perfectly still behind my wall of security. I lowered the microphone. I looked down at Victoria. She had collapsed onto the floor, not in a faint, but in a tantrum. She was pounding her fists on the carpet, screaming incoherently. Richard was clutching his chest, and this time, I suspected the pain was real. Sarah walked up the stairs and stood next to me. She handed me a handkerchief. "You have a little champagne spray on your dress," she noted calmly. I wiped the spot. "Are we done?" Sarah asked. "Not yet," I said, looking at the ruins of the party. "The police will be here in 4 minutes. I timed the call." I looked at Marcus, who was now being pinned to the floor of the stage. His face pressed against the wood. He was sobbing, not tears of remorse, but tears of a spoiled child who had finally been told, no. "I told you, Marcus," I said, though he couldn't hear me over the noise of the crowd. I am not a stain. I am the solvent. I turned and walked off the stage. The guests parted for me again, but this time, it wasn't out of curiosity, it was out of fear. They looked at me as if I were a natural disaster. They looked at me and saw their own secrets being exposed. I walked toward the exit, Sarah at my side. The flashbulbs were still popping, but I didn't blink. I walked out of the ballroom, down the hall, and out the front door into the cool night air. The sirens were already wailing in the distance. Blue and red lights were flashing against the trees at the end of the driveway. The feast was over. The vultures were about to starve. The ballroom doors did not just open, they were breached. If the atmosphere inside the Whitfield estate had been a suffocating fog of denial, the arrival of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Securities and Exchange Commission was the hurricane that blew the roof off. It was a scene of absolute kinetic chaos. I watched from my vantage point near the stage as the phalanx of agents streamed into the room. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized efficiency. These were not the local beat cops coming to break up a noise complaint. These were federal agents wearing windbreakers emblazoned with three-letter acronyms that strike fear into the hearts of billionaires: FBI and SEC. The music stopped instantly. The string quartet, who had been valiantly trying to play Mozart over the sound of Marcus screaming, lowered their instruments and fled toward the kitchen. "Federal agents," a voice boomed, amplified by a megaphone. "Nobody move. This is a raid authorized by the United States Department of Justice. Stay where you are and keep your hands visible." The guests, the senators, the bankers, the socialites, froze. It was a tableau of panic. A woman in a red dress dropped her champagne flute, and the sound of the crystal shattering on the marble floor was the only noise in the cavernous room for a split second. Then, the screaming started. It wasn't the guests screaming, it was my family, Marcus, still pinned to the stage floor by my private security, began to thrash like a wild animal caught in a trap. He saw the agents approaching him, and the reality of his situation finally pierced through his delusion. "I have rights," he howled, his face pressed against the polished wood. "My father knows the governor. You cannot touch me. This is a mistake. My sister is lying." Two agents climbed onto the stage. They did not look impressed. One of them, a tall man with a buzz cut, tapped my security guard on the shoulder. My guard nodded and stepped back, releasing Marcus. Before Marcus could even scramble to his knees, the agents had him. They didn't treat him like a scion of a dynasty. They treated him like exactly what he was, a suspect in a multi-million-dollar fraud case. They slammed him against the podium, pulling his arms behind his back with a force that made him yelp. "Marcus Whitfield," the agent recited, his voice flat and bored. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent." "I am not silent," Marcus shrieked, spit flying from his mouth. "I am a Whitfield. Mother, do something. Call the lawyers. Call the fixers." I looked down at the floor where Victoria was still kneeling. She wasn't calling anyone. She was staring at the agents swarming her house, seizing laptops, photographing documents, and securing the exits. Her world, built entirely on perception and control, was dissolving into pixels before her eyes. An older man in a charcoal suit walked through the crowd, heading straight for me. I recognized him immediately. Special Agent Henderson from the Financial Crimes Division. We had spent countless hours on encrypted video calls over the last half-year. He stopped in front of me and nodded. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "The assets have been frozen. The warrants are being executed at the corporate headquarters in Manhattan as we speak. We have the server logs you provided." Victoria's head snapped up. She looked from the agent to me, her eyes widening in a horrific realization. "Provided?" she whispered. She scrambled to her feet, her silver gown tearing on a stray nail in the floorboards. She didn't care. She stumbled toward me, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You," she hissed. You have been talking to them? For 6 months. Victoria, I said calmly. The crowd gasped. The whispers turned into a roar. 6 months. She was a mole. She was watching them the whole time. I realized Marcus was laundering money through the supply chain back in June, I continued, my voice steady amidst the madness. I realized you were using the charity to evade taxes in July. I didn't leave because I was scared. I stayed silent because I was building the case. Every email you sent me, every threat Marcus texted, every fake press release, it all went directly to Agent Henderson. Victoria let out a sound that was not human. It was a guttural screech of betrayal. She lunged at me, her manicured claws reaching for my face, but Agent Henderson stepped in between us, holding up a hand. Back away. Mrs. Whitfield, he warned. Victoria ignored him. She looked over his shoulder, locking eyes with me. You traitor! She screamed, tears streaming down her face, cutting tracks through her heavy makeup. You ungrateful, poisonous snake! We are your family. We gave you everything. We gave you life. How could you do this to your own blood? You are a monster. The room went silent again, watching the matriarch of New York society lose her mind. I stepped out from behind the agent. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the scared little girl she used to lock in her room when I didn't smile enough. You called me lowly, remember? I said, my voice carrying clearly over the din. You sent a text to the entire family calling me a stain because I was a single mother. You thought that stripped me of my dignity. I took a step closer to her, invading her space. But you were wrong, Victoria, I said. Being a mother didn't make me weak. It gave me a moral compass. I am not doing this because I hate you. I am doing this because I refuse to let my son grow up thinking that this, I gestured to the opulent, rotting room, is what success looks like. I am proving that the lowly single mom has a standard of ethics that you cannot even comprehend. I have no daughter, Victoria spat. I know, I replied. You lost her the day you chose money over loyalty. Now you have neither. Behind us, a sudden commotion erupted near the buffet tables. Richard! Someone shouted. He is down! I turned to look. My father, Richard Whitfield, had collapsed. He was clutching his chest, his face a color of gray ash that matched the expensive carpet. This was not a performance. This was not the fake angina attack he had staged on the phone to manipulate me. This was the physical manifestation of a lifetime of stress and greed causing a catastrophic system failure. Call 911, a waiter shouted, dropping a tray of champagne. But the reaction of the guests was what chilled me to the bone. The elite of New York, the people my parents had spent their lives trying to impress, did not rush to help. They did not perform CPR. They did not comfort him. Instead, they raised their phones. I watched in horror as a circle of tuxedos and gowns formed around my dying father. Flashes went off. Click, click, click. They were filming him. They were live streaming the death of a titan. They were feeding on the tragedy like vultures picking at a carcass. Get back, I shouted. The first time my voice had raised in anger all night, I pushed past Agent Henderson and ran toward my father. Give him air! Get away from him! I knelt beside him. His eyes were rolling back in his head. His breathing was ragged, a terrible rattling sound in his throat. Richard, I said, checking his pulse. It was erratic, thready. He looked up at me. His eyes were unfocused. But for a second, they locked onto mine. There was no rage left in them, just fear, pure, naked fear. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle came out. He reached out a hand, trembling, grasping at the air. I didn't take it. I couldn't. I just signaled to the paramedics who were rushing in with the police. He is in cardiac arrest, I told the medic. He has a history of high blood pressure and he is taking beta blockers, as they loaded him onto the stretcher. I stood up. I looked at the crowd of people still holding up their phones. You are all sick, I said. Get out. They didn't move. They were mesmerized by the drama. Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, my sister Serena was enacting her own tragedy. She was huddled against a marble column. Her phone held up to her face, the ring light attached to the case blindingly bright. She was live streaming. "Guys, I am literally shaking right now." She was sobbing into the camera, her mascara perfectly smeared for maximum sympathy. "The police just broke into our house. They are hurting my brother. My dad just had a heart attack. I don't know what is happening. We are being targeted. Please, send help. Send prayers. This is a witch hunt." I walked over to her. I stood just outside the frame of her video. "Serena," I said. She jumped, turning the camera toward me. "And here she is!" Serena shrieked, pivoting her narrative instantly. "The cause of it all. My sister. Guys, look at her. She is standing there in her expensive dress while our dad dies. She did this." I looked at her screen. I could see the comments rolling in. They were moving so fast it was a blur of text, but they were not sending prayers. LMAO, stop acting Serena. The receipts are all over Twitter. Your sister is a hero. We saw the SEC report. You stole money from a water charity? Gross. Team Natalia. Imagine live streaming your dad's heart attack for clout. You are trash. Cancel Serena Whitfield. Serena saw the comments too. Her face went pale. The validation she craved. The army of fans she thought she commanded. They had turned on her. The internet, which she had used as a weapon for years, was now the firing squad. They are lying, she stammered at the phone. You guys don't know the truth. They know the truth. Serena, I said softly. I released the bank statements from Serena's sanctuary an hour ago. They know you spent the donation money on a trip to Cabo and this dress. It is over. Serena looked at me, then at the phone. The comments were a wall of thief, scammer, and liar. She let out a wail of despair and threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. She slid down the column, burying her face in her hands, weeping for the loss of her followers, not her father. The room was emptying now. The police were ushering the guests out. The agents were placing yellow tape across the doors to the library and the office. Ms. Whitfield, Agent Henderson said, appearing at my elbow, we have secured the premises. Marcus is in custody. Your father is en route to the hospital under guard. We will need you to come to the field office tomorrow to formalize the statement, but you are free to go for tonight. I looked around the ballroom one last time. It was a wreckage, shattered glass, overturned chairs, abandoned shoes. The winter gala banners were sagging. The smell of expensive perfume had been replaced by the smell of sweat and fear. I looked at Victoria. She was sitting on a chair near the stage, guarded by a female officer. She was staring at nothing. She looked old. The fire was gone. She was just a woman in a torn dress, sitting in the ruins of an empire she had sacrificed her own children to build. She didn't look at me. Goodbye, Mother, I said. She didn't answer. I turned and walked toward the main entrance. Sarah, my lawyer, was waiting for me at the door. She looked shaken, but professional. That was... Sarah struggled for a word. Necessary, I finished for her. We walked out of the heavy oak doors. The cool night air hit my face, cleansing the smell of the ballroom from my lungs. The driveway was a sea of flashing red and blue lights. The police tape was already strung up across the grand staircase, fluttering in the wind like a chaotic party streamer. I stepped over the yellow tape. I didn't look back at the mansion. I didn't look back at the ambulance taking my father away. I didn't look back at the life I had just dismantled. I walked to my car. The driver was waiting. I slid into the back seat. The silence inside the armored car was heavy and beautiful. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling slightly now. The adrenaline finally fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. I dialed the number for the hotel suite. It rang twice. Hello? A small voice answered. It was Leo. He sounded sleepy. Leo, I said, and my voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. Leo, it is Mom. Mom? He asked, perking up. Is the party over? I closed my eyes. I could still hear the sirens, but they were fading. "Yes, baby," I said, leaning my head back against the leather seat. "The party is over. The cleanup is done." "Did you win?" he asked. It was such a simple question. I thought about Marcus in handcuffs. I thought about Richard in the ambulance. I thought of Victoria staring at the wall. I thought of the empty, hollow feeling in my chest where a family should be. "I didn't win, Leo," I said softly. "I just stopped losing. Are you coming back?" "I am on my way right now," I said. "Put your shoes on. We are going home." "To the basement apartment?" he asked. "No," I said, looking out the window as the car pulled away from the cliffside estate, leaving the flashing lights behind in the darkness. "We are going home to Chicago, to our life, the real one." "Okay," he said. "I saved you a piece of pizza." A tear finally escaped my eye. Just one. I wiped it away before it could fall. "I love you, Leo," I said. "I love you too. Mom." I hung up the phone. "To the airport," I told the driver. "And don't stop for anything." The car accelerated, merging onto the highway, heading away from the ruins of the Whitfield legacy and toward the future I had bought with the truth. 7 days. That is exactly how long it took for the majestic, century-old Whitfield dynasty to crumble into a pile of foreclosed assets and legal notices. In the movies, the fall of an empire is often depicted with explosions and dramatic music. In reality, it is much quieter. It sounds like the scratching of a pen on a seizure order. It sounds like the beep of a moving truck backing up to the front door of a mansion to strip it of its furniture. It sounds like a silence so heavy it crushes the lungs of the people left behind. I watched it all from my office in Chicago. I did not go back to New York. I did not need to. The news cycle did the work for me. On Monday, the bank formally seized the Hamptons estate. The mortgage had not been paid in 6 months, and with the stock price plummeting to less than $2 a share, the collateral was worthless. On Tuesday, Richard Whitfield was transferred from the private cardiac wing of Mount Sinai to a state-funded facility because his health insurance had been flagged for non-payment. He was alive, but he was a shell of a man, staring at the ceiling, likely replaying the moment his daughter walked away from him while he grasped for air. On Wednesday, Marcus was denied bail. The judge, a woman who had once been snubbed by my mother at a charity luncheon, declared him a flight risk. He was currently sitting in a holding cell at Rikers Island, trading his tailored suits for an orange jumpsuit that did not fit. And then there was Victoria, my mother, the queen of the social register, the woman who believed that poverty was a moral failing and that net worth was the only measure of a human soul. She had been evicted from the penthouse. The doorman, a man she had never tipped in 20 years, had reportedly escorted her out with a distinct lack of sympathy. She had nowhere to go. Her friends, the ladies who lunched, the gala committee members, had stopped answering her calls the moment the FBI raided the party. They were like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Terrified that the contagion of failure would jump to them, I knew where she was. My private investigator had tracked her to a motel on the outskirts of Queens. It was a place with neon signs that buzzed and sheets that smelled of stale smoke. The rate was $59 a night. I imagined her sitting there, surrounded by her Louis Vuitton luggage, realizing that the leather bags were now worth more than her life. I felt nothing. No pity, no joy, just the cold, hard satisfaction of an equation finally balancing out to zero. It was Friday afternoon. The sky over Chicago was a brilliant, piercing blue. I was in the main conference room of Veritas Horizon. The walls were made of floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city I had conquered. I was sitting at the head of a mahogany table that was long enough to land a plane on. Seated around me were 6 representatives from a Japanese technology conglomerate. We were finalizing a merger that would reshape the semiconductor industry. The deal was worth $4 billion. Ms. Whitfield. Mr. Tanaka, the lead negotiator, said, adjusting his glasses. Regarding the risk assessment in paragraph 4, We are concerned about the regulatory oversight in the European market. Mr. Tanaka, I said, my voice smooth and confident, I have already factored in a 12% buffer for regulatory fines. If you look at page 32 of the addendum, you will see that we have insulated the core assets from any potential litigation. He looked at the page. He nodded, impressed. Your thoroughness is formidable. I do not like surprises, I said with a small smile. At that exact moment, a surprise arrived. There was a commotion outside the glass doors. My executive assistant, Sarah, was standing there, trying to block someone. I could see her waving her arms. I could see the panic on her face. And then, the doors were shoved open. Victoria Whitfield burst into the room. The silence that fell over the conference table was absolute. The Japanese executives turned in their chairs, their polite expressions replaced by shock. My mother looked like a ghost that had been dragged through a hurricane. Her hair, usually a helmet of perfection, was matted and greasy. She was wearing a trench coat over a wrinkled dress that I recognized from 3 seasons ago. Her makeup was smeared, dark circles of mascara ringing her eyes like bruises. She was trembling. She smelled of cheap gin and desperation. "Natalia!" she screamed. Sarah ran in behind her, looking mortified. "Ms. Whitfield, I am so sorry." She pushed past security. She said it was a life-or-death emergency. I raised a hand, stopping Sarah. I did not stand up. I remained seated at the head of the table. My hands clasped over the merger documents. "It is okay, Sarah," I said calmly. I turned my gaze to the woman standing in the doorway. She looked small. She looked pathetic. "Hello, Victoria," I said. Victoria stared at me. She looked at the expensive suit I was wearing. She looked at the powerful men sitting around me. She looked at the view of the city behind me. The contrast between her reality and mine was violent. She did not scream this time. She did not command. She collapsed, right there, on the plush gray carpet of my conference room. Victoria Whitfield fell to her knees. It was emotion so foreign to her anatomy that it looked painful. She crawled forward, her hands grasping at the legs of the table. "Natalia," she sobbed, her voice broken and raspy. "Please, I am begging you, help us." "Mr. Tanaka looked at me, his eyes wide. "Ms. Whitfield, should we call the police?" "No," I said, never taking my eyes off my mother. "Natalia," Victoria cried, crawling closer until she was right beside my chair. She reached out and grabbed the hem of my pants. I pulled my leg away, sharply. "Mommy is sorry." She wept. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, Natalia, you have to help Marcus. They are going to kill him in prison. He is soft. He cannot survive there. And Daddy? Daddy needs surgery. We have no money. They took everything. They took the house. They took the cars." She looked up at me, her face a map of ruin. "You have money," she whispered. "Everyone says you are rich now. You are a partner here. You have millions. Just a little bit. Just enough to pay the lawyers. Just enough to get bail. Please, I am your mother. I gave birth to you." The room was thick with tension. The Japanese investors were looking at the floor, embarrassed to be witnessing such a raw display of American family dysfunction. This was the test. This was the moment every victim of abuse dreams of and dreads. The moment the abuser comes crawling back, stripped of their power, appealing to the very humanity they tried to destroy. It is a trap. It is a test of resolve. If you show mercy, they win. If you show weakness, they latch on like leeches and drain you dry again. I looked at her. I saw the woman who had criticized my weight when I was 12. I saw the woman who had told me no man would ever love me. I saw the woman who had called my son a stain. I stood up. "Gentlemen," I said to the investors, my voice steady, "please excuse us for 5 minutes. My assistant will show you to the lounge and provide refreshments." Mr. Tanaka nodded, gathering his papers quickly. "Of course, Take your time." They filed out of the room, casting one last look at the weeping woman on the floor. Sarah closed the glass doors, leaving us alone. The soundproofing was excellent. The screams of the city outside were muted. The only sound was Victoria's jagged breathing. "Oh, thank God," Victoria wept, trying to stand up, thinking that my dismissal of the others meant I was going to help her. "Thank God. I knew you still had a heart. We can fix this, Natalia. We can hire a new legal team. We can sue the bank." She reached for my hand. I took a step back. "Sit down, Victoria," I said. She froze. "What?" "Sit down." I pointed to a chair at the far end of the table. "You do not touch me. You do not stand near me." She hesitated, then shuffled to the chair and sat down. Huddling into her coat, she looked at me with wide, hopeful eyes. "We are family," she whispered. "Blood is thicker than water, Natalia. You cannot deny that." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Blood," I repeated. "That is an interesting word. You like to use it when you need a transfusion, but you were very quick to spill it when it didn't suit your image." I unlocked my phone. I navigated to the photo album. I found the screenshot. I had kept it for 4 years. It was the wallpaper of my soul. I walked over to the large presentation screen on the wall. I cast the image from my phone to the monitor. The text message appeared. 10 feet tall, glowing in high definition. She chose to be a lowly single mom. I no longer see her as my daughter. The presence of a lowly single mom like her is a stain on our perfect image. Victoria looked at the screen. She flinched as if I had slapped her. "That," she stammered. "That was just, I was angry. I didn't mean it. It was stress." "No," I said, walking toward her. "You meant every word. You meant it because you believed that my value as a human being was tied to my marital status and my bank account. You believed that because I was a single mother, I was broken. I was a stain." I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the mahogany. "You were right, Victoria," I said softly. She looked confused. "I was?" "Yes," I said. "I am a single mother, and do you know what single mothers do? We survive. We adapt. We protect our cubs with a ferocity that people like you cannot understand." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Because I am a mother," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "I have a duty to protect my son from toxicity. I have a duty to keep him away from people who view love as a transaction. I have a duty to ensure that he never, ever feels the way you made me feel." "But I am his grandmother," she wailed. "No," I said. "You are a stranger. You are a cautionary tale." I stood up straight, adjusting the lapels of my blazer. I felt light, the weight of 34 years of expectation, of desire for approval, of hurt. It just evaporated. "You are not my family," I said. "Family is the people who hold you when you cry, not the people who make you cry. Family is the people who feed you when you are hungry, not the people who starve you to teach you a lesson." I pointed to the door. "You are a lesson. Victoria," I said. "You taught me exactly who I do not want to be, and for that, I thank you. But the class is over, and I have graduated." Victoria stared at me. The hope in her eyes died, replaced by a cold, dark realization. She saw the wall. She saw the end. "You are heartless," she whispered. "I am pragmatic," I corrected. I pressed the button on the intercom console. "Security," I said. "Please come to the main conference room. I have an intruder." Victoria gasped. "You wouldn't." I just did. 2 minutes later, the doors opened. 2 large security guards in uniform stepped in. They looked at the disheveled woman in the chair. "Please escort this woman out of the building," I instructed. "If she returns, call the police and file charges for harassment and trespassing. She is barred from the premises permanently." The guards walked over to Victoria. One of them took her arm gently but firmly. "Come on, ma'am," he said. Victoria stood up. She looked at me one last time. She opened her mouth to scream, to curse, to beg, but nothing came out. She saw the absolute finality in my eyes. She saw the ghost auditor. She let out a low, keen wail of despair and allowed herself to be led away. I watched her go. I watched the doors close behind her. The room was silent again. I walked to the window. I looked down at the streets of Chicago. 50 stories below. The cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. Somewhere down there, Victoria was standing on the sidewalk, alone in the cold. Somewhere down there, Marcus was sitting in a cell. Somewhere down there, my father was lying in a hospital bed. And somewhere in this city, in a warm, safe apartment, Leo was building a Lego castle, waiting for his mom to come home and order pizza. I took a deep breath. My lungs filled with cool, conditioned air. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the need to. The account was closed. The audit was complete. I turned away from the window. I smoothed my vest. I walked back to the head of the table. I pressed the intercom button again. "Sarah," I said, "please send Mr. Tanaka and his team back in. We have a merger to finish." I sat down. I opened the file. I picked up my pen. The screen behind me went black. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of justice, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and let me know where you are listening to this story from. I always enjoy reading about the different places our community calls home. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Sunday Drama Stories channel, like this video, and support us further by pressing the hype button so that this story can be heard by even more people. See you in the next one.